episode 19 of the BTB Project. Today's guest has one of the most remarkable comeback stories I've ever witnessed. He was a Colorado junior tennis player that went on to play Division I tennis at Liberty University in Virginia. And 3 months later, he was paralyzed from the neck down. He developed a neurological condition in which the body's immune system attacks healthy nerve cells. It confined him to a hospital bed, lost over 40 pounds, and was put on a ventilator because he lost function in his lungs. After 3.5 months of rigorous rehab, he was able to strengthen his body, will his courage, and go back to play Division I tennis with his team again. Stan Vaughan, welcome to the BTB Project.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby.
Welcome to the BTB Project, designed to empower listeners to identify their why and to live their best lives no matter the circumstances. My name is Coleman Gerhardt. A former athlete and motivational coach, I've had the opportunity to inspire thousands through my story and help accomplish what they are built to be. You'll be encouraged by each and every episode, and let's get into it.
Yeah, when I blow up, I'ma soar high like Peter Pan. In real life, be living out my dreams. If I'm waking up, it's in a foreign land.
Well, it's an absolute privilege and honor to welcome Stan Vaughan to the BTB Project. Welcome, man.
Thank you, Coleman. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's a little bit surreal for me because it's amazing how God has worked in our respective lives. And I never would have thought that my past sales job that I would be tasked to kind of leverage my network and meet with folks that are sales minded and in the technology business. And I remember reaching out to you on LinkedIn, and at that point, it had been at least a few years since we had connected last. Somehow, some way, we found our calendars to align to meet over in Highlands Ranch to grab some lunch. Do you remember that day?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it was ironic, right? Because I had messaged the Valor tennis coach the day before and I wanted to see if I could get involved in some way. And then you happened to be the assistant coach, which was funny and funny how God works. So
100%. And, for the listeners, Stan and I, go way back, and our conversation today is really to share his journey and really one of the most remarkable stories of perseverance that I've ever been part of. We have certainly had a lot of, things in common when it comes to tennis and Colorado and things like that. But, that conversation I think was really neat because it really gave us an opportunity, as you mentioned, to reconnect as coaches. And to go a little bit further back, I want to go back to the town you grew up in, near Evergreen, Colorado. And at that point, I was a few years out of college and really digging deep into my coaching career. And I remember, teaching a few lessons, and I came across this high school player, to be quite honest, looked more like a man than I did at that time. And I'm like, how is this possible? I'm in my late 20s and this kid's walking around, looking like a grown-up man. I mean, I would just love to walk the listeners through, really your journey as a high school player to start, because you were one of the most prolific high school players in Colorado, in my opinion, just with your game and, the heart and passion that you put into competing. Maybe walk us through what it was like living in a mountain town and trying to develop your tennis game.
Yeah, that's a good question, Coleman. I think, like you said, growing up in Genesee, Colorado, which is right outside of Evergreen, which I think is about 6,000 or 7,000 feet above sea level.
Tennis is not designed to be played at that elevation for the listeners, right?
There's not a lot of high-level tennis players in that area, and let alone developing your game at that elevation is very tough. And then you got to battle the weather and all of that. But yeah, I appreciate you talking about my high school career. I was a late bloomer in tennis. I was a soccer player growing up, and then tennis I really started to take seriously when I was about 12, 13. So it was right before high school. And then ended up going to Mullen High School, playing I think 2 or 3 singles my freshman year right off the bat. And then really my game took off from there because I was passionate about tennis and wanted to do everything I could. And my sophomore year is actually when I went to the second half of my sophomore year. I actually went to Advantage Tennis Academy out in California for a semester, which really took my game to the next level. I had to almost get out of Colorado, as funny as that sounded, to really get to that next level what I wanted. So that's when my game took off, and then I had a pretty good high school career after that, I would say.
Yeah, it's amazing, being a Colorado native myself, and I've had several folks on the podcast, Stan, that have been on very similar journeys that you just shared. It is tough to get everything you need competition-wise, coaching-wise, and really more importantly, the hours on the court here in Colorado being so seasonal. And folks like Kellen D'Amico's and Richard Johnson, I find it ironic that, you end up going to a place at Advantage Tennis Academy where you ran into guys like Richard Johnson. So maybe tell us how Advantage became an opportunity for you, being such a late bloomer as a tennis player. And did you get noticed by a coach, or just curious if it goes through how Advantage became an opportunity?
Yeah, that's a good question. Biggest thing about me is I was an athletic guy, big guy, tall, and so I could use, and I was a quick learner. So there's some, I guess, intangibles that I had that allowed my game to progress. And Andy Zoden here in Colorado was kind of my first coach in my childhood. And then I knew about Mitch Bridge. He ran a tennis academy in Grand Junction, and he did some kind of a clinic, and he came out, and I think it was at Greenwood Athletic Club, and did a clinic and noticed me, and we had a great conversation. And at that time, he was transitioning out to Irvine, and he was going to be a director at Advantage Tennis Academy. So I went out and visited, and my parents and I and the family really kind of decided, is this something that we wanted to do or not? And I was all in. So it was really just about my parents giving the buy-in, I guess.
So that's interesting. Mitch Bridge, if I understand correctly, he was a pretty big coach and had an academy up in Grand Junction, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So what brought him to Greenwood, and was he doing these clinics all around the state, or did you just happen to come across something that he was doing that was, pretty special?
Yeah, it was kind of random. I think he was doing some advertising for his academy, and I can't remember if it was the one in Grand Junction at the time or if it was for Advantage, but that's how we first got connected. And I knew about his son, Jordan, big-time Colorado tennis player, and Richard Johnson trained under Mitch Bridge as well. And so when I went out to California for that semester, Richard had just graduated Pepperdine, and so I got to play with guys like that. Wow. He had just won the national championship and got to hit with just about anybody and everybody from that was good in the Intermountain region. So, and that's all I needed. I needed reps. I needed just time to get better.
Sophomore year, you go to Advantage and you're given this tremendous opportunity. At that point, really, what was your goal? I mean, were you trying to play college? Were you trying to play on the tour? Walk us through, how big did you think your game was going to get?
Yeah, really my goal was to play college at a high level. So probably Division I would say was my goal at the time. I didn't know what that meant, right? When you're 15 or 16. And I know you had Kellen D'Amico on the other day. As I'm thinking through all this, like there couldn't be any more differences between my junior career and Kellen's, besides the fact that we both played tennis and we both played Division I. Right. But I was a late bloomer. I did not have this stellar junior career by any means. It got better as I got older, right. and then really kind of, I guess, peaked in college. Yeah, that was my goal, to answer your question, was just to play at the highest level possible. I knew pro was pretty dang difficult. So closer you get to college, and after college, you realize how difficult that really is. But when you're a kid, you're like, yeah, I want I'll maybe take a crack at it. But I think college was more the realistic goal. So
Yeah, and I have a lot of similarity to you, Stan, because I was, a late bloomer too, starting at 14 years old and doing the academy setting myself in Arizona after graduating high school and taking that gap year. It's amazing how much just maturity-wise, to be perfectly frank, happens between after high school and in college. So, I'm just curious based off of, your development, and even if your game was big enough, do you think mentally you had what it took to play, a few future matches or whatnot? Or are you really truly thankful for the path that college took you?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I would say, and we can talk about this too, Coleman, but my history with the autoimmune disease that I got my freshman year in college, I would say that set me back a little bit physically in terms of my playing career. After that was full of a little bit more fatigue, and I could still play at a really high level, but it was not what it probably could have been in terms of the level that I could have reached. But mentally, I would say I was strong, and I had some friends that played some futures, and, they would make their $75 for reaching the finals or whatever it is. I mean, totally underpaid. It was just more for them to go out and say they did it more than make it big time, because you know how tough it is. I still got friends on, that are trying to make it. So
yeah, it's not only tough, but I think coming from Colorado, it's tougher. I appreciate you planting the seed about some of the challenges you had in the beginning of your college career, which I certainly want to get to. And I mean, for the listeners, I can't stress enough. I mean, Stan, you could have played any sport you wanted. You could have been a football guy. You could have been a basketball guy. And I'm just curious, was tennis always your sport, or were you a multi-sport athlete growing up?
Yeah. So ironically, I picked tennis, which, size helps in a lot of ways for sure. But, I was a soccer player, and then I went into tennis. I just had a love for it, and it just kind of grabbed me more than anything else. It's funny. Yeah, because I've lived with a bunch of basketball players in college at Liberty. I actually didn't live with the tennis guys. I did for a little bit, but then I had a lot of friends on the basketball team, which was kind of funny, and I was bigger than all of them.
Right.
We did have a pretty short basketball team, I will say that. But
oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely got the height gene and some pretty good genes from my dad and my uncle. They were both college tennis players, and played a few years of football too. So I definitely built an athletic kind of lineage, or carried it on per se. And I'm thankful for that. And when I think of you, obviously being able to do a lot and be gifted physically, tell me about how you grew up and a little bit about your family, because I think you inherited some genetics that allowed you to really do some awesome things physically, and maybe even helped develop your mental demeanor. But can you tell me about how you grew up, and have you always been a Colorado guy?
Yeah, so very unconventional story. I was actually born in Russia, and my mom and I never met my biological dad, actually. He left when I was, about 1 or 2 years old. And my mom had me when she was, pretty young. And we moved over to the United States when I was about 6 years old, because her parents had come over here and kind of tried to get us out of there. And that's how I landed in Colorado. And so and my mom later got remarried to my dad now, who's been my dad since I was about 8 years old. And he was the one that kind of initially got me into soccer, and then eventually I found tennis. For some reason, like I said, that kind of grabbed me and hooked me. I didn't really know how, big I would be, and, physically, yeah, strong, I guess.
Right.
But, the older I got, I think it definitely helped my tennis game for sure. That didn't hurt. And so, yeah, that was my family. And I grew up in Golden, and there in Genesee, and it was just a great childhood. I mean, from that point on, in terms of, after getting here to the United States, very loving, supportive family. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. There's quite an age gap between us, 8 years between me and my brother and 11 years between me and my sister. Yeah, my parents were extremely just supportive. They were not overbearing parents, you know, that you can kind of get in sports sometimes, in youth sports. And so they really kind of let me flourish when it came to, you know, choosing the sport that I wanted to do. And I think that's why I grabbed on to tennis so much, is they were pretty hands off and just supported me in what I needed financially or whatever it was. And so I think that allowed me to not get burnt out. Obviously, the ability to go to a tennis academy, which is not cheap, and really, you know, get my game to a pretty high level, and then have a good high school career and then go to college after that. So
I appreciate you sharing that. I knew about your dad and kind of how things came about, and it really resonated with me, and really how we started this conversation today, Stan, is, you know, God puts people in their lives for a reason. And, you know, here I am sitting almost 13 years into marriage and 3 kids. And I met my son when he was 2.5 and became dad, and had an opportunity to just be there for him. It's not this overabundance of being someone you're not. It's just being yourself. And to hear you say with your parents who have raised you and your stepdad that, you know, he became dad and gave you an outlet and a life and a platform to do some really miraculous things. So I was very aware of your support system too, because when I taught at Evergreen, I remember, I believe it was your grandmother who did a few of my classes. That was just the light of the world, man. I mean, every time I saw this lady, she just resonated passion and light and great conversations. Can you speak about your grandmother?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Thanks for remembering that she'd go up to the Evergreen bubble, I remember, and she would get some lessons. And I mean, she's still playing tennis, you know, to this day. And my grandparents and my parents, but especially my grandparents, coming out of Russia, and people don't really realize the kind of the hardship that is, in terms of the, you know, the struggle's real over there. It's not, right. It's not the United States. There's a reason why people want to come here. And I think that she has carried she's naturally a very optimistic and, you know, just grateful person. But I think especially because of that experience, she just always seems like she's, you know, extremely joyful about life, and she's always like that around our family, and like you said, is definitely a big light,
yes,
and encouragement. And so, yeah, I appreciate you asking about that.
Well, that too is what's funny is I remember she had a high ticking motor. I mean, she was not one that ran out of energy anytime soon. So again, just knowing a little bit of your background, it's awesome that she's still playing tennis and keeping herself in shape. You go to do this Advantage Tennis Academy, and you come back to Colorado. And was it just your junior and senior year you had remaining at Mullen, or were you just back at Mullen for 1 year?
It was my junior and senior year. Yep.
Gotcha. So when you came back to Colorado, how was your game after training for, you know, a semester or a year? And maybe walk me through the position you played and some of the success you had on the tail end of your high school career.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the game obviously just changes when you're playing 2 or 3 hours of tennis a day with, you know, some of the highest level juniors in the country. So yeah. it changed quite a bit. I would say the consistency and the confidence and all that just skyrocketed. I played number one singles at Mullen, and I never won state, but I think I got second 1 year, third another year or something like that. And yeah, it was great. I mean, you know, as you know, getting ready for college, it's not as much about the high school accolades as it is right. about the tournaments and all that you have to play and travel and all of that. So my game definitely increased.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, I know that you ultimately selected Liberty University, but I'm curious, based off of, yes, you had the high school accolades, and yes, you had the tournament success. Were there some other schools you were looking at or that you were recruited by that you were thinking about besides Liberty?
Yeah. So, I was not thinking East Coast at all. For those that aren't familiar, Liberty is in Lynchburg, Virginia, this little podunk town. My mom and I, we took a trip out west, and we visited a lot of schools on the West Coast. So a lot of the UC schools out in California, so like UC Davis, Riverside, Irvine, and then all the way up to I visited Gonzaga.
Okay.
And so visited actually your alma mater as well, UNC.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think. I think that was about it, but I was mainly looking on the West Coast. And then got a letter from Liberty saying to come out for a visit. And I said, I did some research on it. I was like, I've never heard of this school, but at this point it was pretty late in my senior year. I hadn't made a decision. Ended up taking it in terms of taking the opportunity to go out there and visiting. And man, I fell in love with it. Obviously it was a Division I school in terms of the athletics, which was my goal. But, aside from that, the faith aspect, as a Christian, to be able to be in that environment. I had never heard of it before. So Liberty was pretty new to me and foreign to me, but right away I called my parents. I was like, this is where I'm going to go. And with that, it was no doubt that I wanted to be here and that God wanted me there. So
that's awesome. And, we're going to get into your college career, but one thing that I really enjoyed as not only someone that was able to hit and coach you a little bit, but being able to drive up to Grand Junction before you went to college and play the Elam Classic together. It's crazy to know, the connection with Mitch Bridge. And then I've shared on previous podcasts that I got to watch Richard Johnson serve it out for Pepperdine to win the national championship in 2006, who is also from Grand Junction. That tournament is probably the most competitive tournament that you can play in Colorado outside of the Colorado State Open. And, they deem it a pro amateur tournament. And I wish I could have carried my own a little bit more with you, but we played doubles together and then we both played in the singles draw. But do you remember that Elam Classic and kind of I believe that was maybe the summer before you went to college? And, how was that tournament for you?
Oh man, that's a blast from the past for sure. It was a great tournament. I love spending time with you. Honestly, Coleman, it was one of those things. You get a hotel with your buddy and get to play doubles together, and it was probably the highest paying tournament in Colorado at the time, or one of them. And Coleman and I are just these two big guys that look like we should be on the football field,
yes,
but are just blasting serves and then nothing else.
I think we played two guys that were active tennis players. I don't know where they played. I don't know if it was Iowa but I remember they had pretty big games. But listen, for those of you who are not prone to tennis, Stan and I were able to kind of hack our success in tennis because we had that big serve and we had a big ground stroke. And if you can keep the point short and not have somebody get you into too much trouble, you can have a lot of success. And I felt like we held our own pretty well in that tournament nonetheless.
Yeah, we did. That's right. Yeah, just the rallies were short, that's for sure.
So you wrap up your high school career and you accept the offer to attend Liberty University. I would, at that point, I think I was still coaching at Evergreen, but transitioning back to get closer into the city. And I'll never forget it, man. I kept my eye on you, watched you kind of start your college journey, which I know is just such a fun, exciting part of your life. And all of a sudden, and I can't recall how I found out, Stan, but I went from playing pro amateur tournaments with you to coming to visit you in a hospital bed. Walk me through the autoimmune disorder and that point of your life. And I'm trying to keep it together when I share that, because it was one of the most challenging things that I had to see as your friend. But more importantly, knowing who you are as a person. Old cliche, if you don't want to see bad things happen to good people. And I felt like God was really putting you in a situation to lean on him. And I just would love for you to share with the listeners your story.
Yeah, thanks for that. It was a crazy thing, and so coming into college, as I mentioned, my game kind of kept just climbing, all throughout high school. Never really reached my peak, and then once I got into that college environment where I was really, it was obviously it's like a tennis academy.
Right.
I mean, you're playing 2-3 hours a day, right when I basically touched down in Virginia and started playing. Those first few months, my game already really took off. And as a freshman, I was playing really well. I think me and my buddy, Seem Toos, he's from Estonia, we played the #1 double spot that fall and won a tournament at the University of Georgia.
Wow.
Yeah.
In
Athens.
Wow.
Yeah. And that stadium court, right. And that was like a couple weeks before I kind of went down with my sickness. But just to say that, like, things had been going well, and I had been top of my game in terms of like the shape that I was in, and strength, and just physical ability. And I was like, man, this is going to be a fun ride. And I started to, I at that time I was looking back now, I realize how stressed I was that first semester and those first few months of coming in. Everything is new.
Was it hard being away from your family? And
no, that wasn't tough.
Okay.
It was more of the just school and the pressure of sports and just kind of getting used to everything, right? And the new roommates, the new relationships that you have, and all of that. I mean, it was all kind of a lot. And so I think that the stress kind of took a toll on me a little bit. So I got sick, and I started getting a sore throat. It was kind of a normal sickness at first, It's like, oh, I got strep, or, whatever it was. So I went to go get a test, and they said that I had mono. And that's how it started, was kind of a sore throat and some other just, normal, just kind of fatigue, weakness, stuff like that you get with a virus. And they gave me some drugs to be able to treat the mono. I think it was, just kind of some normal steroids to reduce the swelling. So this was in a span of probably about 2 or 3 days, kind of found out, and then I got treatment for it. Within about a day of taking those steroids that I was prescribed by the one of the Liberty docs, I started feeling some tingling in my face. And I think it was around my forehead area, and kind of progressed to my eyes, or around my eyes a little bit. And it was just kind of topical, so it was just right on my skin. And it felt weird. And I didn't really know what was going on. So this was about a day or two after taking those steroids. And I kind of just kept, just didn't think much of it. And then it started progressively getting worse, and I also started feeling it on my feet as well. So kind of from my face, and then also from my feet, it started to progress towards the rest of my body. And this was like I said, about day 2, day 3.
I mean, were you able to get out of bed? I mean, did you have energy, or was it just this tingling sensation that was throwing you off?
I had energy. I remember it was like we were having like a Halloween party at our school. There was like a costume thing. I remember it, pretty vividly. That I was pretty fine for that. It was just this tingling that was going on. But that night, I think it was October 26th, 2010. I was laying in bed, and I was like, something's not right. And then it started to progress, pretty quickly. My face, by that point, my face was pretty much completely numb. I couldn't sleep, obviously. My eyes started getting a little bit weird as well. I started getting pretty nauseous because I couldn't see straight. And then I started getting sick, and I thought, maybe I had a stomach flu, but I knew it was something worse than that. So I called my RA. This was the middle of the night, and I said, we got to go to the hospital. He takes me into the hospital. Again, this is Lynchburg, Virginia. They're not exactly known for, the best hospitals in the world. It's pretty,
right?
it's pretty pretty far out there in terms of, out in the middle of nowhere. They could not figure out what was wrong with me. They did all these tests. I had ended up getting a lumbar puncture to really test for this thing called Guillain-Barre Syndrome, which this neurologist thought I had, and turns out that he was right.
What is the process of getting a lumbar puncture? Because I resonate well with problems that I've had, and I just actually released an episode regarding the tumor in my spinal canal and going through surgery that impacted me into who I am today. But what is a lumbar puncture? And I guess at that point, how common is this syndrome?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Guillain-Barre syndrome is, to answer your second question, is extremely rare. I think it's 1 out of every 100,000 or something like that get it. And what it is, for those that aren't familiar, is just a progressive neurological disorder and paralysis. So it just kind of completely paralyzes you. Yeah, and it's an autoimmune disease triggered by a virus or like a flu shot. It could even be triggered by that too. But a lumbar puncture, all that is just, it's kind of like an epidural that, they stick a big old needle into your spine and grab spinal fluid to basically test for, I don't know all the scientific terms for it, but it tests for this autoimmune disease. And it turns out that I had it. And it took them about 8 hours to figure it out. They didn't really know what it was because it was so rare. And by that night, I was completely paralyzed, meaning, head to toe, couldn't feel a thing. I had needed assistance walking to the bathroom. And so I went from, top level Division I athlete in top shape to basically a vegetable almost overnight. And there was nothing that I could do about it or anyone could do about it. That's how it started.
So you spoke about the kind of medical treatment you were getting there in Virginia, and it wasn't quite up to speed based off of what you needed with this diagnosis. Tell me about the conversations with your family, the conversations with your coach, your teammates. What was going through your mind in that moment?
Yeah, so I, as an 18-year-old kid, I didn't really know, no one really knew what it was, but especially for me, I mean, I didn't really know what it was, and I wouldn't say I was scared at the time, because I was probably too naive to really know the implications of what this meant. But my parents were out in Colorado still, and they got the call, I think, from one of my friends, and they flew out immediately, obviously, because it was very serious. And they came out to Lynchburg and came over to the hospital. My teammates, they supported me as well. They were in there, pretty frequently, especially after I was intubated. So, Guillain-Barre, it affects your muscles and your peripheral nervous system, affects the myelin sheath. So meaning you're not able to really feel anything. And then eventually the fear with Guillain-Barre is that it gets to your lungs, and it eventually did and slowed down my breathing. So I actually had to be put on a ventilator for 13 days and was intubated. And that was pretty horrible. But I remember my teammates, standing around me during that time while I was just laying in a hospital bed. They were just obviously completely devastated and heartbroken at the fact that no one really knew if I would be able to walk again or, let alone play tennis again. But they were just trying to make sure that I was all right. And I was definitely not.
As I mentioned earlier, I kind of found out through the grapevine that you had developed this condition, and fast forward to you're getting the help that you need in Virginia, but it wasn't enough. So your parents or you guys decided to get you back home. And I remember realizing that you were at Craig Hospital, and I just remember walking in, and the best way I can describe it was, this young man that, strong and had, as you've said, a lot of opportunity, a lot of physical gifts. I almost barely recognized you. You had pretty bad atrophy at that point. I think you were a few weeks into this. I know you weren't intubated anymore, but I just remember sitting beside you in that hospital bed and being pretty gutted by flashbacks of what I experienced. You know, my senior year of college, my career ended from a back injury that led to an MRI that led to this 1 out of every 10,000 MRIs, they find these tumors. And I had the tumor cut out 3 days later. And I was in a hospital bed and teammates around me. And man, it just, that moment with you at Craig was pretty vulnerable. Do you remember that day? And can you maybe tell the listeners about your recovery in Colorado?
Yeah, I do remember that. And it was, so it was a few weeks in Virginia being intubated. And the thing with Guillain-Barre is it has to kind of run its course. There's no treatment or cure. And so I had to get to physical therapy after being paralyzed and losing, probably about 40 pounds. I had to relearn how to walk and everything. And they told me, there's a good chance that I wouldn't be able to walk again and, let alone play tennis again. And so that was running through my head. But my, back here in Denver is Craig Hospital, which I think specializes in athletes, if I'm not mistaken. And so I don't know if it was my parents who initiated that or the doctors.
They have one of actually the best nerve and or brain recovery centers in the country.
Yeah.
And I know that well because my wife's cousin, he went to School of Mines and he was driving a pickup truck with a trailer on the back with all of his stuff from college, and he got rear-ended and ended up having brain trauma and basically was told that he wasn't going to make it. And through the rehabilitation at Craig, he is married, I believe just had his second child, and graduated with a molecular engineering degree from Mines. So Craig has been known for, on the neurological side, to be one of the best.
Yeah, that's right. I left Virginia, went to Craig, and I was a patient there for about I want to say a month or something like that. And it was pretty intense physical therapy. And you're in there with, I remember being in there with guys that had, meningitis, and there was stuff like that just really, is serious, deadly stuff, paragliding accidents. So like you said, it's all neurological stuff. And so it's not the happiest environment in the world, but man, it is humbling. And I do remember you being there, and there's, when you're relearning how to walk and take steps with a walker, and just doing simple things again, it is
humbling.
It's humbling, yeah, and it makes the bad days in this world not seem so bad, right? I mean, it was a crazy journey, and it took about a month or so for me to kind of relearn how to walk again. And then after that, I don't want to say it was, a super quick recovery, but my body really, once this thing ran its course, it really turned, and my body started to kind of pick up again and get stronger. The last thing to go was my feet. My feet had numbness in them for a long time. And so, but at that moment, it was depressing, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to play tennis again. But, we talk about our faith. God really, not to sound cliche, as tough and as hard as that was, I had this, just kind of assurance and peace, man, that I was going to be all right. And I don't know if it was me being naive or what it was, but I never felt this huge, overwhelming sense of fear, which I think helped a lot.
Yeah, that feeling of being all right, it's amazing when you are at such a vulnerable point to where you kind of only have two choices in that position. Is you either lean into that comfort through him, or you lean into your own understanding, which, going back to maybe how this all started, the stress that you were feeling at college, right? Our minds can play a lot of interesting tricks on us, but it also can be the match flame that creates all sorts of physical outcomes in the body.
Yeah.
So I find it interesting, the parallel of how this started for you and how it ended. And what was neat is not how it ended with getting the syndrome that you got, but how it springboarded you to getting back to college and playing college tennis. I just want to know what it was like to step on that court again for Liberty after being through this. Walk us through that match. Did you have a peanut gallery with some signs celebrating you being out there? I'd love to hear about that moment for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I got diagnosed with Guillain-Barre, and the whole thing was probably about 2 months of just me being out of it, relearning how to walk, all of that stuff. And then that kind of led me into winter break, where I had some more time to rehab and all of that. And me being I don't know if this is good or not, but I'm antsy. I hate, just kind of sitting around, and I've always been an active guy. I wanted to take a crack at getting back on the team that spring, getting back in the lineup. And so I did. I started hitting balls, over that winter break while I was relearning how to walk. It's crazy. While my feet were numb, and I would wear ankle braces, and I would hit balls, which I think actually helped my rehab process, obviously, staying active. I was able to play in the first match in the starting lineup, which is crazy to think about it now, on January 27th of 2011. So, what was that? 3-4 months earlier, I was on a ventilator, not able to walk, or not sure if I was going to even make it. My coach putting me in the starting lineup, I think I played 6, that match, but it was, let alone a Division I match.
Wow.
Wasn't a walk in the park. And I think I was the only guy. This is what I'm most proud of, probably my whole college career, is that we lost 7-0, but I was the only guy to take a set off of my opponent that day. And that's what my team really celebrated, was the fact that, man, I mean, glory to God's goodness and faithfulness, right? To bring me out of something like that. I mean, I don't take credit for that, but God really brought me low, and it was such a healing thing. As you mentioned, I had a lot of stress that first semester, and I was stressed with school and had all these things going on, and I felt like it was God's way of putting his hand on me and saying, just rest, man. I gotcha. And after that, he took me through that season of pain, and I was able to play tennis again, obviously. And then shortly afterwards, I met my wife, who played volleyball at Liberty.
Yes.
And had a much better career than I did. She was a stud, just an amazing athlete. And we're married today and have a beautiful baby girl. But it's funny how when you think you're going to Liberty or you're going to play college tennis, you have this vision for yourself, and then how God just turns it into something else that's actually better. But sometimes it's harder at the time. So I met my wife and went through this crazy journey that he brought me through, and I still got to play college tennis, which I'm so thankful for.
Yeah, I mean, you have such a beautiful family, Stan, and that's, I think, we have a lot of mutual respect for one another. But a question that I have, because I felt this when I was laying in the hospital bed and this tumor affected my pelvis, so I had issues of just using the restroom, right? Knowing what you've been through in your childhood, and, learning about your dad and your stepfather, and being in that state that you were in, being paralyzed. Did you ever have thoughts of, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to have a family and be someone that, is obviously you can get married, but, being able to have children? Those are things that were going through my mind. And I'm just curious if those were going through yours, and if so, what an unbelievable story of redemption that has taken place here.
Yeah. It ran through my mind a few times. What's funny is that when I was at my lowest point, I remember my trainer, Aaron Schreiner, who's still there at Liberty, who's an amazing guy, saying, "Stan, do not worry. You're going to have beautiful babies one day.
Wow. That's awesome, man.
And, you know, and so that always stuck in my head. So
Yeah.
I never really thought about it or worried about it after that. But it's funny you mentioned that, because my wife and I, we had our baby girl about 15 months ago. And it took us a little bit. It took us about 3 years of trying, and there was nothing wrong with us medically or anything like that.
Yeah.
And we prayed and prayed, and again, just God's faithfulness. I mean, obviously that doesn't happen every time, but you know, He was gracious enough to give us a beautiful, healthy little girl in His timing. And so all these things that God puts us through, it's all worth it, and it's all, you know, to show us that He's with us through everything.
I appreciate you walking us through that. And yes, you got a beautiful baby girl, and you know, God has just done some miraculous things in you and your wife's life to have that blessing of a little girl. And you know, as we're winding down here, Stan, I got a one last question that I think is important for the listeners to hear your perspective. Is you have an unbelievable story. It's something that is not only inspiring, but it's coming from a heart of an individual that's just fueled by God and a big picture, and truly, you know, serving Him and honoring Him and glorifying Him. And I give you so much respect for that. But when it's all said and done, you know, here you are with all of these different experiences, right? And ironically, we flash forward to today, to where you're coming out and hitting with some high school kids every now and then. And, you know, kids are not looking down at you. They're looking up at you because of your presence, which is just awesome for me to see as a coach. But, you know, if you had an opportunity to, you know, sit down with a 15 or 16-year-old Stan, knowing what you know now, going what you've gone through, playing the D1, having a beautiful family, in a sales career now, you know, not really around tennis as much anymore. But when it comes to life advice that you would give yourself at 16, what would you share, knowing what you know?
Wow, that's a deep question. That's a great question. If I had to go back to when I was 16, you know, so many things have happened. I'm 31, so that was, you know, almost half my life ago. You know, again, I would say faith at the end of the day for me has been such a big thing, because even when life doesn't go like you want it to, or you run into challenges or whatever it is, God uses all those things to bring you closer to Him, and actually turns out way better than what you would have actually planned for yourself. So I had all these big dreams, all these big ambitions. If I had it my way, I would have been just on the pro tour for 10 years, you know, all these accolades. And I mean, as you know, that's a rough life. And it's, you know, God, is that truly what you want?
Right.
And you don't know what you don't know when you're 16. And so I would just say, lean into Him, I would say, and really just follow what you're passionate about as well. I think God gives you desires. You know, if that's tennis, then go for it and give it all you got, because things will turn into other things and other opportunities that will lead to things. And even if you're not highly ranked as a junior, don't be discouraged. I can think of a few stories right now of, you know, top level Division I guys who didn't have the best junior career you would have never thought, and then vice versa too. So man, there's a lot of time and a lot of things that can happen still. So
well said, Stan. It's incredible to walk through your story, your journey. I am grateful for you to join the BTB project, and thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today.
Thank you, Coleman. Happy to be here.
Awesome. For the listeners, it's been just an incredibly exciting journey that we've been on together, and we're going to continue to inspire and share stories of some really special people in my life that will hopefully encourage you to overcome any challenge that you have. as I always say, impossible's nothing. I don't say it as a cliche. I say it because I truly believe it. And it's stories like Stan that can allow us to see what we're possible of doing and who we can really help every individual at the end of the day. Thanks for checking it out, and take care.
You're told I'll be a harder temptation, 'cause I know that